North Atlantic Autumn, 1942. Type 7, U-boats of the Kriegsmarine, hunted in wolf packs, under command of Admiral Karl Dönitz. Kapitänleutnant Klaus Hoffmann stood in the conning tower of U-573, while diesel fumes mixed with freezing spray. American merchant losses had reached 700,000 gross tons in a single month during the second happy time. Through the periscope he counted 45 ships steaming in 12 columns protected by only 4 destroyers. 4 torpedoes left the tubes at 2,000 yards. 4 explosions lifted columns of water higher than the masts. 4 ships gone. 3 days later, another convoy appeared larger than the one before. Then another. The same ocean that once lay empty now carried endless ranks of new hulls sliding past the horizon. Hoffmann ordered the war diary updated with 6 ships sunk on this patrol, total displacement 41,000 tons. He spoke the first quiet truth to his watch officer. American yards now launched more tonnage every week than all U-boats together sank in a month. Each new Liberty ship moved at 11 knots on 2,500 horsepower from a simple steam turbine. They crossed the ocean in formations that never thinned. 1 ship completed every day at some yards, sometimes 2 in 24 hours. German yards needed 9 months to deliver 1 new U-boat. Battery charge fell below 30% after 8 hours submerged. The mathematics grew colder than the water outside the pressure hull. At night, the boats surfaced, and diesels roared back to life. Radio messages from Lorient confirmed Allied construction exceeded 4 million gross tons launched since January. U-boat sinkings removed less than half that figure even at peak efficiency. Red pins on the plot table no longer advanced. The Atlantic carried an American tide no torpedo could stop. Crew reload drills slowed with fatigue. The control room fell quiet. Men understood the numbers before officers spoke them. The war beneath the waves had become an industrial equation Germany could not solve. Hoffmann closed the diary, while another convoy thundered overhead, propellers beating like drums that never ceased. The Battle of the Atlantic began on the 3rd of September, 1939, when U-30 sank the passenger liner Athenia and continued without pause until May 1945. Germany depended on Swedish iron ore moving through Norwegian leads, and on oil that never came. Britain required every ton of wheat, aviation, fuel and steel to cross 3,000 miles of ocean, guarded by the Royal Navy and later by American destroyers. When the United States entered the war in December 1941, the Allied merchant fleet stood at 21 million gross tons. Admiral Karl Dönitz believed 600,000 tons sunk each month would starve Britain within 1 year. The first half of 1942 proved him right. U-boats operated inside American territorial waters almost unopposed. Cities refused blackout. Amusement pier lights silhouetted tankers for the taking. Torches from burning ships rose above the horizon off Cape Hatteras and New Jersey. In those months, Germany sank 800 ships for 3,800,000 gross tons. Yet the same coastline held shipyards already changing shift patterns from 1 to 3. Steel plate arrived by the trainload. Welders trained in weeks replaced riveters who needed years. The emergency shipbuilding program placed orders for 260 Liberty ships in 1941 alone. Average building time fell from 200 to 33 days, in 1941 to 42 days, by December 1942. Prefabrication allowed entire bow sections to swing into place under gantry cranes taller than church steeples. One keel laid while the previous hull still cooled from launching torches. German naval intelligence read the launch announcements and filed them under propaganda. U-boat commanders at sea saw the reality. Convoy HX-229 lost 13 ships in March 1943. Convoy SC-122 lost 11 the same week. 24 hours later, Bletchley Park intercepts revealed American yards had already replaced every lost ton and added surplus. Net Allied tonnage grew by 1 million gross tons in the first quarter of 1943, while U-boats removed 800,000. Dönitz demanded 100 new submarines each month. German industry delivered 15. American yards delivered 90 merchant ships plus escorts. Britain received 7 million tons of Lend-Lease cargo in 1942 alone. Every ton landed strengthened the island. Every ton sent to the bottom merely delayed the inevitable by days. The entire campaign balanced on one number no one in Berlin wished to face. Replacement speed now outran destruction speed by a growing margin. The constraint was no longer trained crew or torpedo supply. The constraint had become arithmetic. American industrial capacity shifted into full war footing within 6 months of Pearl Harbor. 18 new shipyards broke ground or expanded between 1941 and 1943. The Maritime Commission controlled steel allocation and labor drafts. Kaiser Yards on the West Coast and Bethlehem Fairfield in Baltimore set the pace. Average Liberty ship construction time dropped to 27 days by mid-1943. Some hulls left the ways in 14 days from keel laying to launch. One recorded record stood at 4 days 15 hours for hull number 1944 at Richmond Yard 2. Welded construction replaced riveted seams. One continuous plate reduced leakage and saved weight. Each vessel displaced 10,700 gross tons and carried 9,000 tons of cargo at 11 knots. Triple expansion steam engines required only basic machine shops for overhaul. Spare parts arrived in crates that doubled as deck cargo on the same voyage. Total Liberty ship output reached 2,708 vessels, completed between 1941 and 1945. Victory ships followed in 1944, with higher speed and greater range, adding another 531 hulls. Combined emergency programs produced over 5,500 ocean-going merchant ships during the war years. German U-boat construction never approached comparable scale. German yards laid down 1,163 submarines of all types from 1935 to 1945. Peak monthly delivery reached 29 boats in 1943 and quickly fell as bombing disrupted components. Each Type 7 required 9 months from keel to commissioning under normal conditions. Allied bombing extended that period to 14 months by 1944. Frontline strength rarely exceeded 250 operational boats at any moment. Peak sinking performance came in 1942, when U-boats sent 6,360,000 gross tons to the bottom across the entire year. American yards launched 8 million gross tons of new merchant shipping in 1943 alone. The gap widened each quarter. One Liberty ship replaced the cargo capacity of roughly 3 average pre-war freighters sunk. Crew training kept pace. Merchant marine schools graduated 6,000 officers per year. German replacement crews dwindled as experienced men failed to return. Torpedo expenditure exceeded production in 1943. Acoustic torpedoes arrived too late and in insufficient numbers. American escort carriers entered service at the rate of 1 every 6 weeks by late 1943. Each carrier embarked 24 aircraft, capable of covering 400 miles of ocean. The production race had already ended before most U-boat commanders accepted the result. New hulls crossed the Atlantic faster than old ones settled on the seabed. The ocean filled with American steel. Kapitänleutnant Klaus Hoffmann stood wedged in the conning tower of U-573 North Atlantic night, pressing cold against his oilskin coat. The diesel engines thumped at a head slow, while the lookouts swept the black horizon with binoculars. Ahead, faint silhouettes grew into another eastbound convoy, 62 ships, this time columns stretching 8 miles stem to stern. 6 months earlier, such a target would have emptied every torpedo tube twice over. Tonight, only 3 eels remained after 2 fruitless days chasing shadows through rain squalls. He ordered the attack anyway. Dive. Silent running. Periscope depth. Range 3,000 yards closing to 900. 4 shots in quick succession. 1 hit, 1 premature detonation, 2 misses against a new tanker riding high and fast. 1 ship lost perhaps 7,000 tons. The escorts reacted within 90 seconds. Radar-guided destroyers cut the water with searchlights that found nothing, yet depth charges walked the exact grid where U-573 had fired. Hoffmann took her down to 200 meters and crept away on batteries now reading 28%. In the control room, the crew listened to propeller noise that never faded. Another 20 escorts had joined the screen since the last patrol. When they surfaced 8 hours later, the radio room handed him the daily fleet summary from Kerneval. American yards launched 105 merchant ships the previous month. U-boats worldwide sank 39. He read the numbers twice, then folded the flimsy and placed it in the pocket of his leather jacket. The first watch officer asked whether they should break off and return to base for reloading. Hoffman stared at the chart, where red grease pencil crosses now overlapped blue convoy tracks. The crosses no longer moved forward. He remembered 1942 when a single patrol brought 28 days at sea and 11 confirmed kills. Crew came back drunk on success and French wine. Now the same 28 days yielded 3 doubtful hits and half the men coughing from battery acid fumes. Torpedo reload took 4 hours instead of 2. Hands shook too much for faster work. The cook served the same ersatz coffee 3 times a day because fresh water grew scarce. Men no longer asked when the next victory pennant would fly from the attack periscope. They asked only how many more patrols before rotation home. Hoffman climbed back to the bridge alone. Dawn showed a grey, empty sea, yet he knew within hours another convoy would appear, because the building ways never rested. He felt the old certainty drain away like water through the boat's limber holes. The U-boat remained deadly, but deadliness no longer mattered when every wound closed before the next blow landed. Germany fought with craft and courage. America fought with blast furnaces running 3 shifts under floodlights that turned night into day. The ocean itself had changed sides. May 1943 became known in Carnival as Black May. German U-boats lost 41 boats in 31 days, while sinking only 58 merchant ships. Allied merchant tonnage increased by 1,200,000 gross tons during the same period. American yards averaged 1. Liberty ship launched every 9 hours across all 14 emergency yards. Centimetric radar appeared on escort vessels. Wavelength 10 centimeters defeated the old METOX receivers that once warned of approaching aircraft. Hedgehog mortars threw 24 contact-fused bombs ahead of the attacking ship. Explosion required hull contact instead of depth setting. Depth, charge patterns tightened to lethal grids. Escort carriers now sailed inside the convoys themselves. Grumman Avenger aircraft carried sonobuoys and Fido acoustic torpedoes that hunted submerged boats. U-boat average patrol duration fell from 38 days in 1942 to 21 days before destruction or forced return. German snorkel equipment remained experimental. Boats still required surface time for battery recharge. Recharge required 6 hours at slow speed. 6 hours exposed the boat to radar and air patrol that now flew continuous grids. Allied codebreakers read daily U-boat positions from Enigma traffic. Hunter-killer groups formed around jeep carriers steamed directly to reported grid squares. U-boat losses reached 87 boats in the last 4 months of 1943. German yards commissioned only 112 new boats in the same span. Experienced commanders vanished at the rate of 15 per month. Replacement crews received 8 weeks of basic training instead of 6 months. Torpedo reliability collapsed. Magnetic pistols failed in northern latitudes. Acoustic torpedoes circled back on the firing boat in 7 recorded cases. Allied merchant losses fell below 100,000 gross tons per month by July 1943. American production reached 20 million gross tons of new shipping launched since Pearl Harbor. Escort construction matched the pace. 150 destroyer escorts joined the fleet in 1943 alone. Long-range B-24 Liberator aircraft closed the Mid-Atlantic air gap. 1 squadron covered 800 miles of ocean from Newfoundland and Iceland bases. U-boat frontline strength dropped below 200 operational boats for the first time since 1941. Admiral Dönitz withdrew the Wolfpacks from the North Atlantic convoy routes on the 24th of May 1943. The order read temporary suspension of offensive operations against North Atlantic convoys. Every commander understood temporary meant permanent. The replacement rate had turned decisive. 1 new hull entered service for every 3 torpedoes that found a target. The ocean no longer offered refuge. Kapitän-Lieutenant Klaus Hoffmann read the withdrawal order in the dim red light of the control room and felt nothing at first. Only the familiar throb of the diesels pushing U-573 west at 12 knots toward safer water off Brazil. The words themselves carried no drama. They arrived as plain text from BW, stating that Wolfpack operations against the North Atlantic convoys would cease until new weapons and tactics matured. Translation was simple. The campaign had failed. The ocean that once belonged to the Grey Wolves now belonged to convoys that sailed unmolested from New York to Liverpool. Hoffman folded the signal and placed it beside the chart, where the last plotted convoy track ran straight and unbroken. In the wardroom that evening, the officers spoke in low voices. No one mentioned victory pennants or tonnage scores anymore. They spoke of fuel remaining of battery acid eating through the deck plates of how many days until the next overhaul that would never come. The first watch officer calculated that American yards now launched one ship every 7 hours across all ways. German yards had delivered only 9 new boats in the past 30 days. 9 boats against 180 hulls. The arithmetic required no further discussion. Later, alone on the bridge under a sky thick with stars, Hoffman listened to the sea. The old confidence had vanished like exhaust smoke in the wind. He remembered the early patrols when a single wolf pack could scatter 40 ships and send 20 to the bottom before breakfast. Now the same 40 ships sailed inside a moving fortress of steel and radar and aircraft. Every torpedo fired bought minutes of life, nothing more. German naval staff in Berlin still issued orders for renewed offensives, promising acoustic torpedoes, faster boats, Walter propulsion that would run submerged for weeks. None arrived in time. Snorkel tubes reached the fleet in penny packets. Half the fittings leaked at depth. The new type XXI electroboats remained on the ways under bombing that grew heavier each week. 194 were ordered. 24 reached operational status before the war ended. None sank an enemy ship on war patrol. Hoffman looked east toward Europe and understood the truth no staff map in Kurneval could hide. The U-boat had been the perfect weapon against a world of slow replacement. It became the wrong weapon the moment American building ways began turning out one standardized hull every 7 hours around the clock. The myth of decisive underwater warfare died not in a single battle, but in the steady drumbeat of launchings announced daily on American radio. Each trumpet blast for another Liberty ship sliding down the ways marked one more nail. The crew sensed the collapse before the officers admitted it. Reload drills stopped altogether. Torpedoes remained in the tubes because targets no longer appeared. Men wrote letters home they never expected to mail. The boat ran westward, chasing scattered independents, sinking perhaps one freighter every 10 days when luck and darkness aligned. The Atlantic stretched wider and emptier than ever before. The hunters had become hunted, and the ocean itself now carried the sound of American hammers that never paused. The withdrawal of the Wolfpacks in May 1943 marked the decisive turning point. From June onward, Allied convoys crossed the North Atlantic, with losses measured in single ships rather than entire columns. Monthly merchant sinkings fell below 50,000 gross tons by August and never rose above 100,000 again. American shipyards maintained their rhythm without interruption. 1943 closed with 19 million gross tons of new shipping launched, more than the entire pre-war British merchant fleet. 1944 added another 22 million. Liberty ships and Victory ships arrived in British ports faster than dock workers could unload them. Crates of tanks, aircraft engines and canned rations stacked 3 deep along the quays of Liverpool and Glasgow. The secure sea lane guaranteed the build-up for Operation Overlord. By June 1944, over 1,500,000 American troops stood in Britain with full equipment because the Atlantic Bridge never broke. Every division that embarked in Normandy carried ammunition and fuel delivered by hulls built in Baltimore, Richmond and Portland. German attempts to renew the submarine offensive in 1944 and 1945 achieved nothing measurable. Inshore snorkel boats laid mines and fired occasional torpedoes, yet the tonnage war had ended 2 years earlier. German industry completed only 298 new U-boats after Black May against losses of 572 boats in the same period. Crew quality collapsed. Training time fell to 4 weeks. Survivors from sunken boats filled prison camps in Canada and Virginia, their knowledge useless against an ocean filled with escorts and long-range aircraft. Admiral Dönitz continued broadcasting encouragement until the final days, but the arithmetic remained merciless. The United States Navy took over the Atlantic sea lanes with a fleet that scarcely existed in 1941. Casablanca-class escort carriers numbered 50, in commission by war's end. Destroyer escorts exceeded 450 hulls. The mid-ocean air gap closed forever when very long-range liberators flew from the Azores. No U-boat crossed the Bay of Biscay without meeting patrol aircraft. The German submarine service ended the war, having sunk 11 million gross tons of Allied shipping at the cost of 785 boats and 30,000 men. American shipyards replaced every lost ton 3 times over before the final boat surrendered in May 1945. The lesson settled into naval doctrine across the world. Industrial capacity had become the longest-range weapon of the war. Courage and tactical skill still mattered in individual engagements, yet the side able to replace steel faster than the enemy could sink, it determined the outcome long before the first shot. The Battle of the Atlantic proved that modern war at sea is won in the shipyard rather than on the bridge. The grey wolves vanished beneath waves now crossed by endless columns of grey hulls built under floodlights that never dimmed.